Everybody, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at a couple of submissions. This first one's from Mulo on the Discord, and this is in Unreal. This is really cool, by the way. This is his second iteration of this, with some feedback from Jasmine earlier, which was great. So you said you were kind of going for a sort of moody dystopian atmosphere, which I think you've really captured here. Especially like how you've done the rain here. I think it looks really good. I think it can be difficult to capture rain nicely in a still like this. So here are some of the references you pulled. So I have a couple thoughts about this. I think it works really well as is. Honestly, I think this is the last version, and this is this version, and I really like the lights that you've gotten back here and kind of illuminating more of the building. I think, to me, how you would proceed from here is to define what you want the purpose of this image to be, right? Like, both in terms of story and in terms of the medium, right? You're doing this in Unreal. So if this is for games, I think you've lit this environment beautifully. If you imagine there's a player character here in the front, that's me. The player character, I think, will have a lot of contrast in the scene and really pop, because he or she will be backlit by all this stuff and be dark. In the core here. I think this environment would work really well if you had a player character, or if you had, even if it was for a film or just an art piece, if you had a foreground element, I think that would frame super well against this really foggy background. One thing that I think Jasmine was getting at was that, in a lot of these, they are higher contrast than what you have, especially in the foreground. I think the composition, the way the camera is and the scene is laid out, I think it's actually quite difficult to get that sort of contrast in the focal point, because your focal point, it seems, is quite far back, right? So how do you deal with atmosphere and fog when what you're supposed to be looking at is foggy? And I think, going with Jasmine's point, if you're not looking to have anything in the foreground, or if you're not looking to have this be an environment that a player can walk through, I think there's a couple things that you could try to do to try to make this read better. But it really goes back to, where do you want the viewer's eye to focus? Like, what is the story that you're trying to tell? The thing that I look at is this character, actually, in the middle. This character here. And let's say it is about this character, right? I'm just going to say examples of what I might do based on what you want your story to be. So let's say your little scene is about this guy. I would probably move this volumetric element from here. So, I think the problem with this character at the moment, and he's okay as a background character, but if you were trying to pop him out, the contrast is so low that he just kind of blends in a little bit to the environment. So if you imagine, like, his black levels were a little bit deeper, this is a bad drawing, but I think you understand the idea. Like, his silhouette here would pop much more than it is doing now. So if your story wanted to be about this person, I would probably move this volumetric fog. Maybe you can have it come up here out of these vents or something, creating a nice sort of foggy atmosphere up on the top, and then your story can kind of play out in more more contrast in the bottom. If your story is about this guy on the left side running this way, maybe you leave this volumetric element here, and maybe you even pull it and brighten it more towards this side over here, right? So then this guy is silhouetted against a brighter volume. Not this bright, obviously, but just things to figure out how to tell your story better and more clearly, I think would help. But what you have so far, I think looks really cool. I think to take it further, you would just have to decide what your purpose for this image is. But yeah, I think some of your examples, the advantage of some of these is how many layers of depth they have. And I think stuff like films like Blade Runner, really Blade Runner is like the one for this. Using all of these elements and sometimes quite long lenses to stack elements against each other really makes it feel oppressive and dystopian and compressed. And what that allows you to do is sort of animation multiplane camera style separate out layers, right? So you can see this image here, cyberpunk asset pack, this is like your first layer, right? These buildings here, and then you can see it's stepping back in value for this layer, and then back again, back here, and then finally you have this kind of like all hazed out stuff back there. But the contrast level of this first layer is pretty high. I think with what you have here, it's kind of, you don't have that many layers that are far away from each other, so it's a little bit more challenging to get that to read. If you did want to increase contrast, for example, like I think this would work as well. If you just wanted this image to work on its own, I mean, this is maybe a little too much. And maybe, I think I see a building back here on this side. You might be able to sort of play up the fogginess of this building, put a layer of fog here and light it up so that you see the silhouette, a faded silhouette of this building back here. That might help you with your depth as well. But yeah, I mean, I think you have a great foundation here. I think, as an image, I think it works. I think it's more about where you want to proceed from here. But hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't. I am happy to kind of work this out with you and see where you want to go with this. But great job. This next one's from Tom on the Discord. So this has been through a couple of iterations with some of the other folks giving critiques, which is great. So this is the current version, and these are the versions before. So this is the latest, or the one before this, and this is the original. So looking at some of the feedback that you've gotten on this piece, I think, if I'm being honest, I think your first try was actually the most successful. I think this version here, and this is what Jasmine was getting at as well in her feedback, is that I think this version here is actually the closest to your references and the mood that you're going for, and I'll tell you why. In my opinion, at least, I do think that here you're sort of, it feels like there's too much ambient light. It kind of feels like a little bit like flash photography, where things are going pretty white, and I think the reason for that is that your colors are mixing a lot. So you have this warm fire color, right, but you have the opposite color, which is this blue-green, coming in from this side, and they're mixing and creating white and it's really washing everything out. And I think a key with these reference images is how separated these two color temperatures are, meaning the sources and where they fall on the face and where they fall on the you know, everything are completely separated, so the lights don't really mix, right? So you can see a pretty clear green rim on them, and then from the complete opposite side is this warm orange color, which does not get contaminated by the green because of the angle. And same thing here in this Maleficent piece. You know, this orange is very pure orange, and then you get this rim here. And I think you can achieve something pretty close to that in your image. And I think the closest that you've gotten is your first try here. But, you know, there was some feedback given on this, which I think was great feedback about integrating the foreground and the background more, which you have done in the latest one. So what I would propose, you know, and this is just my opinion, is sort of walking it back to this version and then incorporating some elements of your newest versions, and doing a mix of them, but leaning towards this version, you know. And it might feel bad to do that, but believe me, at least in my experience, this happens all the time. I think, you know, you go with your gut instinct first, and then you get some notes, and it kind of strays away and kind of gets away from you. And then a lot of times the easiest thing to do, what I'll do a lot of the times, is just delete all my lights and start over, you know, or go back to, like, if I'm on version 100, I'll go back to version 2 and start over from there. And, you know, I think it's really not uncommon to kind of run into this kind of thing. So I hope that feedback is not, you know, hurtful or discouraging in any way. But, you know, I think what you've got here is, what you've got in your newer version is successful in certain ways, and there are a lot of elements here that can be brought back to that original version. So I'll talk a little bit about what I think you can incorporate. So basically what I did, and this is kind of janky the way that I'm doing this, but I'm just putting your newest version on top of this and just, like, lowering the opacity so you get a little bit of elements of both. And this might give you a little bit of an idea of, in my opinion at least, what you might, in the direction you might want to go. And the key here, I think, is addressing the notes that were given to you the first time with a little bit more subtlety. You can see, you know, he was asking for more hits of the moonlight on the foreground, and in turn more hits of the fire on the other elements, as well as the background, which you've got. So just by laying this over, you can see, you know, a little bit stronger of a moonlight on the characters here, while still keeping this very localized orange light on the characters. And you can see the sort of same separation now you're getting, similar to, you know, any of these images where this left front of her face, or of their face, is quite pure in its color temperature, and then you're playing this moon rim as more of a rim, right? So it doesn't contaminate most of this warm light, and you're getting that kind of warm feeling on him as well. You know, this is pretty nice here, the way you have this more localized warm color coming from, it's the worst color ever, coming from the bottom, and then you have just this kiss of cool rim on the edge. I think that's really cool. And you're still able to feel this fire on him. One thing I think could help in addition is that when this is animated, which I think you implied that you were going to animate this, one trick that I always do for fire, this works for campfires and torches and everything, is actually put a few lights in the fire, or as acting as your fire. So, for example, I don't know what your setup here is, but what I would normally do is maybe you have one sphere light, right? One sphere light here that's casting out. Seems like a reasonable setup. What I might do instead is have 3 sphere lights, or 4, that are all giving off light, and they're all at slightly different locations, right? So maybe one is more in front and one is more behind. And then in comp, what I like to do is have them all flicker. So what you'll get is like those dancing shadows on the face and on the shadow sides of the character, and you'll see it sort of like the shadow line will move back and forth, and it really gives a nice organic feel to the firelight, both on the characters and in the environment. I think that might help you out a lot with what kind of mood you're going for as well. But yeah, I think, walking it back to this original version and then bringing in those, like, you have some of these hits here, which I think are good. They're just too strong. And maybe localizing it to just just rimming the leaves and then rimming the character as well would help you a lot. What else? I think something, I'm not sure if this is what you're going for, but I think it's worth pointing out maybe, is getting some fog back here and kind of stepping the image more, so this area back here is less contrasty than these blacks up here. So if you were to get some volumetric elements or use your Z depth to fog out this back area a little bit more, that might help your mood a little bit, and kind of get it closer to these references as well. But yeah, I know that's can be difficult to hear, is to go back to an earlier version, but I do think there's a lot of value in what you've done in all these iterations. I think it's just about deciding what works best for your story and what you're going for, and in my opinion is starting from this version and then working your way back. Yeah, great job.